Welcome to WikiPodcast. Today, we're taking a deep dive into something that feels, well, utterly fundamental to the human experience. Love.
Mm-hmm. It really does feel central, doesn't it?
It pops up everywhere in our philosophies, our biology, our relationships, even our spiritual beliefs.
Absolutely.
We've pulled together a fascinating range of perspectives for this, looking at the Wikipedia entry on love, but also exploring things like the biology and meaning of love.
And you need that range because love isn't simple. There's no single easy answer or definition.
Exactly. That's kind of the mission today,
No.
to move beyond those, greeting card definitions and really try to unpack the nuances of this incredibly powerful force.
It's quite a journey we're embarking on. And I think one of the first things you notice when you look into love is just how slippery it is, how hard it is to pin down.
Yeah, like what it means can shift so much depending on culture, language.
Right, who you are, where you are.
Think about the ancient Greeks. They had all those different words, didn't they?
They did. Agape, eros, philia, storge.
Right, each capturing a different flavor, a different kind of love.
It really highlights how multifaceted this whole experience is, even just looking back at one culture.
And it makes you think about how we use the word love today. We say we love our partner.
Well, we also say we love pizza or popcorn, like you mentioned in the sources.
Oh, exactly. Clearly, there's a difference there. We need to distinguish that deep interpersonal connection from just, well, liking something a lot.
And philosophers have definitely grappled with this for centuries, trying to define it.
Yeah, like Aquinas, his definition was to will the good of another. That sounds quite active.
It does. It suggests effort, a desire for someone else's well-being.
And Leibniz had a similar idea, right? Being delighted by the happiness of another.
Yes, focusing on that shared joy. Then you get views like Jeremy Griffiths talking about unconditional selflessness.
That's a high bar.
It is. But what's interesting is how these different definitions all point to core aspects: wanting good for someone, finding joy in their joy, maybe even selflessness.
Okay, so back to loving popcorn for a second. How does that fit? Our sources mention impersonal love?
Yes, exactly. Impersonal love. This is more about strong appreciation or enjoyment or maybe dedication towards a thing or a principle or a cause.
So less about a reciprocal bond.
Precisely. It lacks that back and forth that really defines interpersonal love. Think of a volunteer who loves their cause. It's deep commitment, but different from loving a person.
Got it. Okay, so that sets the stage. Now, let's dive into the science of interpersonal love, the biology. Our sources suggest it's more than just a feeling, it's like a basic drive.
That's a key perspective. Biologically, you could look at love as a fundamental mammalian drive, sort of like hunger or thirst, something pushing us towards connection.
And Helen Fisher breaks this down into stages.
That's right. She proposes 3 main stages: lust, driven by sex hormones like testosterone and estrogen.
Okay, the initial fire.
Then attraction, which is more focused, that obsessive in-love feeling. That's where dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin really kick in.
The feel-good chemicals.
Exactly. And then there's attachment, the longer-term bonding stage.
So that intense attraction phase, how long does that typically last? The sources mention something specific.
Yeah, it's interesting. Research suggests that intense attraction-fueled phase often lasts somewhere between, say, 1.5 to 3 years. It's often not permanent.
Wow, that's shorter than maybe people think.
Yeah.
So what happens then? What helps relationships last beyond that initial high?
Well, that's where attachment becomes really crucial. The focus shifts more towards stability, security, shared life, commitment.
And different chemicals are involved.
Yes, hormones like oxytocin and vasopressin become more central. They're often called the bonding hormones. They foster feelings of calm, security, and trust.
Interesting. And there was something about nerve growth factor, too.
Right, NGF. Levels of this protein seem to spike in the very early stages of romantic love, like the first year, but then they tend to settle back down.
So it's like our biology has different systems for different phases of connection, falling in love versus staying in love.
You could definitely look at it that way. Our bodies seem geared for both the initial spark and the long-term connection.
But of course, love isn't just chemicals firing. Our experience is deeply psychological, too.
Oh, absolutely. The psychological perspective is huge. Robert Sternberg's triangular theory is a really useful framework here.
That's the one with intimacy, passion, and commitment.
That's the one. He argues that different combinations of these 3 components create different types of love. Like intimacy plus passion gives you romantic love, while intimacy plus commitment gives you companionate love.
And having all 3 is consummate love.
Exactly. The ideal, perhaps. And other psychologists, like Rubin, focused on slightly different factors: attachment, caring, and intimacy. There's overlap, but they highlight different nuances.
It seems like that core idea of connection, though, keeps coming through in these psychological models.
It really does. And it influences who we're drawn to as well. You
Mm.
know the old saying, opposites attract.
Yeah, is there any truth to that?
Well, psychologically speaking, the research mostly suggests the opposite, actually. We tend to like people who are similar to us, similar values, personality, background.
So maybe birds of a feather flock together is more accurate.
Generally, yes. Though, interestingly, our sources mention one potential exception: our immune systems. There's some evidence we might subconsciously prefer partners with different immune system genes, which could give offspring a genetic advantage.
Wow, okay, that's a fascinating biological twist within the psychology. So, beyond attraction, psychology also stresses that love isn't just nice to have, it's necessary.
Very much so. Look at attachment theory. It shows how crucial those early bonds between infants and caregivers are for healthy emotional development. That need for connection doesn't just disappear when we grow up.
Right, it stays with us.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Maslow even put love and belonging right there in the middle of his hierarchy of needs. It's fundamental to our sense of well-being and security.
And this fundamental need, it makes sense from an evolutionary perspective too, doesn't it? Helping us survive and raise families.
Exactly. Evolutionary psychology views love, especially that long-term attachment, as a kind of adaptation, a tool that evolved to promote parental cooperation and keep caregivers invested in raising vulnerable offspring.
So it helped ensure kids survive.
That's the idea. Stable pairs, social bonds, love helps create the structures needed for long-term care. There's even a theory linking love, or at least pair bonding, to reduced risk of sexually transmitted diseases in human evolution.
Interesting. And on a more basic genetic level?
Well, interpersonal love often drives mating and sexual reproduction, which, as Mike Cod pointed out in the sources, has its own evolutionary benefits like repairing DNA errors and masking harmful recessive genes. So love isn't just this, abstract emotion. It's deeply woven into the mechanisms of survival and passing on our genes.
It's really incredible how the biology and psychology weave together. One looks at the drives and chemicals, the other at the feelings, thoughts, social aspects.
Right. The biological view often emphasizes that mammalian drive, the hormones, maybe even pheromones. The psychological view sees it more as this complex interplay of companionate and passionate feelings shaped by our experiences and culture.
But both point to how vital connection is.
Undeniably. And they both connect to our health.
Ah, yes, the health benefits. It's not just about feeling happy, is it? It actually affects us physically.
Absolutely. Strong, nurturing, loving relationships have been shown to positively impact brain regions linked to emotion, attention, motivation, memory. The list goes on.
So it helps our brains function better.
In many ways, yes. It can lead to lower stress levels, better immune function, just overall better physical and mental health.
And the flip side, breakups and loss.
They can have significant negative consequences, unfortunately. Increased stress, anxiety, distrust. Some researchers even talk about love addiction and the withdrawal-like symptoms when a relationship ends. It really highlights how profoundly love, or its absence, affects our whole system.
It really does. And the sources mention something about older couples.
Yes, interestingly, the health benefits seem to increase in older married couples, possibly because they provide crucial mutual support for well-being as they navigate aging together.
It really underlines that love isn't just this fluffy, abstract thing. It's a powerful force shaping our biology, our minds, our health, our lives, really.
Definitely. And we haven't even touched much on how different cultures view it yet, or religion, or philosophy.
That's true. The ancient Greeks we mentioned earlier, agape, eros, philia, they're just one example. Agape being that sort of unconditional, maybe even divine love.
Right, contrasted with eros, which was more passionate, sometimes seen as potentially dangerous, though it evolved in meaning, and philia, that important love between friends based on mutual respect and affection.
And the Romans had their own takes too, didn't they? Amicitia for friendship, amor for broader love.
Yes, though some Roman thinkers like Lucretius were quite suspicious of love, seeing it as irrational. Arvid, maybe more playfully, saw it as a kind of game.
It's fascinating how varied the views were even then. What about other cultures? China, for instance.
In Chinese philosophy, you have concepts like Ren, which is about humanity, virtue, reciprocity, a kind of compassionate goodwill. Mozi advocated for universal love, Jinai, and Taoism emphasizes Shi, which is compassion, like a mother's nurturing love.
So different nuances again. And Japan.
Japan has several concepts too. There's A, often translated as love, but with connotations of compassion, maybe selfless love, though its meaning has shifted. Then koi, which is more like romantic longing, perhaps more selfish.
Koi, like in koi fish, or different.
Different character, different meaning. Koi is that yearning. Then there's renai, a more modern term for romantic love, and amai, which is interesting. It's about dependency, like a child's reliance on a parent, seen sometimes as a foundation for close relationships.
Dependency as a foundation? That sounds quite different from Western ideas of independence and love.
It can be, yes. Shows the cultural shaping. And India, of course, has a rich vocabulary in Sanskrit, kama, for pleasure and desire, sneha for affection, prema for elevated love, bhakti for devotions.
So many words.
Exactly. And Indian literature even outlines stages of love. Then you have Persian mysticism, where love is often focused on the divine, God as the ultimate lover and beloved, like in Rumi's poetry.
Right. Which brings us to religious perspectives more broadly. Love is central to so many faiths.
Hugely central. Historically, a lot of understanding about love and relationships was tied to religious principles. In the Abrahamic faiths, for example.
Like Judaism.
In Judaism, you have ahava, love for God and for others.
Yeah.
And hesed, which is deeper loving kindness, grace, covenantal loyalty. Marital love is highly valued too. Rabbi Dessler defined love as giving without expecting to take.
And Christianity. God is love is a core phrase, right?
Yes, from 1 John. Christianity often contrasts eros, worldly love, with agape, unconditional divine love. The greatest commandments are to love God and love your neighbor.
Paul's description of love in 1 Corinthians 13 is very famous too.
Indeed, love is patient, love is kind. Then you have thinkers like Augustine, wrestling with love versus lust, seeing God as the source of true love. C.S. Lewis wrote The Four Loves, analyzing affection, friendship, romantic love, and charity. Agape.
And Jesus' teaching to love your enemies is quite radical.
Extremely. Tertullian noted how pagans were struck by the way Christians loved each other, and even their enemies. It was distinctive.
What about Islam?
In Islam, one of God's names is Al-Wadud, the loving. God is also Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, the most compassionate, the most merciful. There's an emphasis on treating all people with deep kindness. And Sufism, the mystical branch, really focuses on Ishq, divine love, seeing God as lover, loved, and beloved.
And the Baha'i faith.
For the Baha'i faith, love is seen as a capacity of the soul. The foundation is reciprocal love between the individual and God, which motivates obedience to God's commandments, seen as expressions of divine love, lamps of my loving providence, as Baha'u'llah wrote. Abdul-Baha called love the most great law.
Okay, moving eastward, what about the Dharmic religions?
Buddhism. Buddhism talks a lot about love as a universal, selfless quality. Think of the Brahma Viharas loving kindness, metta, compassion, karuna, sympathetic joy, mudita, and equanimity, upekkha. Mahayana Buddhism emphasizes profound compassion through the bodhisattva ideal, delaying one's own enlightenment to help all beings.
So less about romantic love, more universal compassion.
Generally, yes. Though Vajrayana Buddhism also sees love as a potentially transformative force. And in Hinduism, you have kama, pleasure, desire, but also prema, more elevated love, and bhakti, loving devotion to God.
Bhakti, like devotional chanting and service.
Exactly. Especially in Vaishnavism, the focus is on pure, unadulterated love for God, often personified as Krishna. Radha's love for Krishna is held up as the supreme example of selfless devotion.
Wow, such a vast landscape just within religion. And briefly, there are political dimensions too, like free love.
Yes, the free love movement historically wasn't just about sex. It often rejected marriage as a form of social or state control. It aimed to separate the state from personal matters like marriage, relationships, and contraception.
And connected to feminism.
Often, yes. Connected to ideas about women's rights and bodily autonomy, arguing against traditional marriage structures perceived as oppressive.
Okay, and finally, philosophy again. Beyond just defining it, how do philosophers categorize thinking about love?
Our sources group philosophical views into roughly 4 camps. Love is a union, where identities merge. Love is robust concern, deep care for the beloved's well-being for their own sake.
Like Aquinas' idea, perhaps.
Related, yes.
Yeah.
Then love as valuing, either appraising existing valuable qualities or actually bestowing value on the beloved. And finally, love is an emotion, though maybe a complex one, or a specific kind of emotional response. Thinkers like Scruton, Nozick, Vellman, Singer fall into these different camps.
So even philosophers don't agree on exactly what love is, fundamentally. Union, concern, value, emotion.
It shows the complexity. There's no single neat box for it.
It really is vast. We've gone from brain chemistry to ancient Greek words to global religions and philosophies. It makes you realize love is so much more than just one simple feeling or easy definition.
Definitely. It's woven into our biology, our psychology, our cultures, our spiritual seeking.
Mhm.
It's fundamental, but endlessly complex.
It leaves you thinking. I mean, considering all these forces, biology pushing us one way, culture shaping us another, how much real choice or agency do we actually have in who or how we love? That's something to ponder.
A very deep question to reflect on.
Thanks for listening. Write us in the comments your opinion on the episode and what other topics you would like us to talk about. Subscribe to the channel to help us reach more listeners. Thank you and have an amazing day.